Pastor Roy Gerhardt from Galloway United Methodist Church in Franklin, Pennsylvania, sharing a few words of encouragement to help us follow after Jesus. Well, I love history. I love to visit historic sites and visualize the people there and look at artifacts and try to figure out what people did with it, how they worked with it. I love, in fact, exploring different trades and crafts and figuring out how it was done. There are so many things in history that are like solving a mystery, working out all of the evidence and putting together that story so that we can understand the people and the places and the events that took place. Not everyone's into history, though. My younger daughter has never been bitten by the history bug. In fact, when my daughters were fairly young in elementary school, we went on a trip to Gettysburg. And we had an incredible tour guide and a friend who had been a history professor, or a history teacher in high school. And he was able to walk us through every field and every hilltop and tell us with great detail where people stood, what happened there, and just give the whole thing with great images of what happened there. But my younger daughter, she was completely clueless. She had no idea who fought in the Civil War. It was years later that she had an epiphany when all of a sudden, understanding the Civil War, she realized who we had been talking about on that trip to Gettysburg. Well, there are lots of people who really don't understand history and aren't interested. And there's a saying that's often repeated that if you don't remember your history and don't know history, you are doomed to repeat it. There are great lessons to be learned, foundations for our future that can be gained by understanding where we've come from, how did we get here. And so history can be hugely valuable. And in the scripture, we find a story of God's people. The Bible is, in many ways, an incredible history book. And that's important. It's filled with a story of events that happened. And many people would say, even in fact, that we could describe the Bible as his story, the story of God in working out his saving grace in this world through the people of Israel and through his ultimate gift in Jesus Christ, his incarnation in this world. And so that we look back on that with great importance. You know, whenever I started college years ago, I began as a history major. And one of my first courses as a history major was a class exploring how we look at history. How do we study history and how do we really get perspective? And so there was a review of different ways that people had looked at history and its importance over the years. And what stood out to me as a Christian was that the Hebrew people were focused on as an important and influential step in understanding history and in developing our modern historical approach. Because the people of Israel found history to be of absolute importance in building their faith. Many people in antiquity looked at the world as just a magical world where you didn't really know why things happened or what caused things to occur, but you just looked at the whole world like it was a bundle of magic tricks run by unseen powers. But the people of Israel stood out because they believed that history was important. In fact, when we look at the final chapters of the book of Joshua, we see this illustrated perfectly because in the 23rd and 24th chapters of Joshua, he sums up for the people a remembrance of the stories of what God has done. And that is important because that's what their faith is to be built on. Because God did this, because he acted in history in these ways on our behalf, this is why we believe in God. And this is why we will trust God looking into our future. It's not just a belief in a mystic figure that we have no real tangible evidence of, no demonstrations of his presence and power. No, exactly the opposite. Our faith as Christians is built on not just a blind leap of faith, but on a belief in God who has acted, who has demonstrated his presence and power through actions that we can't explain any other way except to recognize that God was in it. And it's on that foundation that we believe and that we put our trust in God. That's a vital part of who we are, believers in the story of God's grace. That's why our testimonies are so powerful, because we continue to tell his story as it unfolds in our lives. May God bless you today. And as you share this good news, may God make you a blessing wherever he takes you.